Now, I love reading through the book of Proverbs, and I highly recommend that you read, at least a chapter of the book of Proverbs every day. It starts out in chapter 1 of Proverbs. It says, what therefore? It says, to know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding. That's one of the purposes of the Proverbs. It says later on in chapter number 4, it says, wisdom is the principal thing. And the principle, that means like it's the most important thing, the principle. It says, wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding. And throughout the book of Proverbs, what you'll find is there are a number of different themes that come up. You can follow some of these themes throughout the book. But a very common thing that's found right throughout the whole book is the concept of rearing children. Okay? Now, you don't need to turn there, but in Ephesians chapter 6, verse number 4, it says, and ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. So when it says bringing up your children, that's talking about rearing a child. That's talking about raising a child. So the title of the sermon this morning is Biblical Child Rearing. Biblical Child Rearing. Now, I better give you sort of a warning or a disclaimer beforehand. This sermon is not a politically correct sermon. Okay? So some people could see this sermon as being offensive. Okay? But you're in Preach the Word Baptist Church this morning, and hopefully the reason you're here is because you want to hear the word preached. You know, I mean, Paul told Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter number 4, he said, preach the word, be instant in season, out of season. He said, reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and doctrine. So when you're reproving someone, or when you're rebuking someone, you're actually saying, hey, look, what you're doing is wrong, and you need to change that. That's what he said to do. He says, look, for the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine. He's saying they're not going to put up with sound doctrine. In other words, when you teach sound doctrine, true things from the Bible, people won't put up with it. He says, but after their own lusts shall they heap themselves teachers having itching ears. In other words, they're going to look for people, they're going to tell them what they want to hear. And he says, and they shall turn away their ears from the truth and shall be turned unto fables. Now, one of the fables that people believe, which is in opposition to the Bible, is that children are naturally good. You heard that sort of concept? People are like, children, they're like a blank slate. They're naturally good. Now, I don't know where people get this idea from. I mean, statistically, if you just look at it, if you open your eyes and look, young children are the most aggressive, abusive, and violent people in this entire world. That's just a fact. That is just a fact. You might think, hang on a second. What are you saying here? But it's true. I mean, you think about this. Let me ask you this question. When was the last time that you screamed at someone? Actually screamed at someone? Maybe you lashed out at someone. Maybe you kicked someone. When was the last time you bit someone? Now, hopefully for most of you people, you're having to think back like years. You're having to think back, this is not something that's happened earlier today or last week or last month. It's a long time ago. Some of you might not even remember it. But I guarantee that you have done it before, you just can't remember, that's all it is, okay? But if you're a young child, it might not be that long ago. It might not be that long ago that you screamed, that you threw yourself on the ground, that you kicked someone, that you bit someone. That could have happened, hopefully not, but that could have happened within recent memory, within the last week, for example, okay? And so the thing about it is, though, is that I suppose because young children, little children, they're little, what that means is although they might do some of these violent, aggressive, abusive type things, they're kind of, because of their size, they're relatively harmless. When a little child kicks it, it's like, it's like we've got some kittens. We've got some kittens recently. And what kittens are like, if you rub their belly, what do? They bite and scratch you and, they do that sort of, that's what kittens do there. And they do that to each other all the time. But of course, think about the difference between the little kitten and compare a little kitten to, think of a cat. Think of like a big cat, like a lion or a tiger, because they start out as sort of little kittens as well. Now, when they're little, they're not going to do much damage, are they? They're not going to do much damage. They can bite and scratch, but it doesn't really do anything. But when they get bigger, you're in a lion or a tiger biting you or scratching you, there's a big difference, and there's a great big difference. Now, here's the thing. A child starts out small. At the start, they're small, and they grow physically bigger over time. Over time, they're going to get bigger. Now, one of the jobs of a parent is to help them grow the right way. We're going to give them the right food. We want to give them, make sure they have fresh air, they get exercise, But more important than how they grow physically is how they grow as a person. In other words, the good qualities or the virtues that a parent should be cultivating in their children, they are more important than the physical qualities. Now, the physical qualities are important as well. You don't want your children to be, to be malnourished. You don't want them to be, sick and all that sort of stuff. But hey, more important is these actual virtues. And also, the most important quality would be spiritual qualities. Don't need to turn there, but Proverbs chapter 9, verse 10 says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And so, we should be teaching our children what? We should be teaching them the fear of the Lord. Now, a lot of the book of Proverbs is actually written from the perspective of a parent teaching their child. And you read the book, and often it's my son this and my son that. But even the parts that don't explicitly say it, we can actually still often see the application with regards to child rearing. We're there in Proverbs chapter number 22. Look at verse number 1. Proverbs chapter number 22, verse number 1. It says, a good name is rather to be chosen than great riches, and loving favour rather than silver and gold. Notice that. Love and favour are better than riches. In other words, it's better to have a reputation for being good. To have love and favour rather than what? Than silver and gold. Now, that's true just in general. That applies for everyone. But think about your child. What would you rather? Would you rather that your child had a reputation for being good? For love and favour from those who are around them? That they love your child. They're very favourable towards your child. Or would you rather them to grow up instead and to be rich, to have silver and gold? I mean, maybe if I illustrated this might help you. Think about this. Imagine if your child grows up and they become, a mafia boss. Imagine that. They become a mafia boss. Well, guess what? Will they have silver and gold? They'll have a lot of it. They'll have a lot of riches. They'll have a lot of wealth. But will they have a good reputation? Will they have, love and favour? Or will they won't, will they? I mean, what about this? Think about if your child, because who wants their child to grow up and be a mafia boss? Does anyone want? Maybe people in the mafia, I don't know, maybe they probably do. Okay, but no normal person is going to want that. What about this? Would you want your child to grow up and be a drug dealer? To be someone who destroys people's lives? Is that what you'd want for your child? No. What about this? Would you want your child to be a pornographer? Grow up and maybe star in pornographic films or make pornographic films and once again destroy other people's lives? No. Okay? Would you want your child to grow up and be a prostitute? No. Is that a good name? They get silver and gold. Apparently it's a very lucrative business. Guess what? Is that something you want for your child? Definitely not. How about this? Would you want your child to grow up and be an abortion doctor? Be an abortion doctor. I mean, hey, they'll probably drive a Mercedes. They'll get paid pretty well. Now, in some people's eyes, they might have a good name. But in anyone who actually values life, anyone who has an understanding of what's right and what's wrong, it's not something that's favourable at all. And any sensible parent would think, I don't want my child to grow up to be any of those things. And understand, just so we're clear, I'm not saying that it's, with all those are things where you can make money. I'm not saying that you have to choose to be poor, that you have to have no silver and gold in order to be godly or have a good name. I mean, look down at verse number 4. It says, look, by humility and the fear of the Lord are riches and honour and life. Do you see what I'm saying? Okay? So there are rewards in being godly. But I suppose one way to think about it is that rather than aim for the reward, we should actually aim to be godly and let the reward take care of itself. I like what Paul says in 1 Timothy chapter number 6. You need to turn there, we'll be back in Proverbs in a second. But in 1 Timothy chapter number 6, verse number 9, he says, but they that will be rich, those that desire to be rich, fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. You see, because, people who desire to get wealthy, the person that's, the mafia boss, the drug dealer, the prostitute, all these different things, they're people, they wanted money. And what's happened? They're drowning in destruction, perdition. It says, verse 10, for the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. But thou, O man of God, flee these things and follow after righteousness, godliness, faith, love, patience, meekness. So he's saying, look, we should follow after godliness. That's what we should be desiring, not pursuing after riches. Okay? Now, look back, hopefully you're still in Proverbs chapter number 22. Look at verse number 3. Look at verse number 3. Here's another verse that you can apply. It says in verse number 3, it says, "A prudent man foreseeth the evil, and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished." So what do we see that what does the prudent person do? The prudent person, they see the evil and they avoid it. They avoid the evil. But what happens to the simple? The simple get punished. Now, we're talking about child rearing this morning. Do you want your child to be prudent and avoid the evil? Or do you want them to be simple? Because if they're simple, guess what? They're going to get punished. In fact, children are actually naturally simple. They're naturally simple. Because simple just means they don't know much. There in Proverbs 22, look at Proverbs chapter number 9. Proverbs chapter number 9 and verse number 13. Proverbs chapter number 9 and verse number 13. It says, "A foolish woman is clamorous." Look at this. "She is simple, knowing nothing." So what does it mean to be simple? It means you don't know anything. Well, guess what? That's what children are like. Look at Proverbs chapter number 7. Proverbs chapter number 7 and verse number 7. We often sing this. Proverbs chapter 7 verse 7. It says, "I beheld among the simple ones, I discerned among the youths." Notice the simple ones, the youths. Because this young guy, he's simple. And he says, "I discerned among the youths a young man void of understanding." Exactly. He's simple. He knows nothing. He's void of understanding. And we know, because we've sung it so many times, what happens as we go through the chapter. Look at verse number 22. "He goeth after her," because he falls prey to the strange woman. "He goeth after her straightway, as an ox goeth to the slaughter." Does that sound good? "Or as a fool to the correction of the stocks, till a dart strike through his liver." Would you like that? You want something sticking into your liver? "As a bird hasteth to the snare, and knoweth not that it is for his life." So we need to understand, look, this simple guy, what happens to him? He goes on and he gets punished because he's not prudent. You want to be wise. You want to be prudent. That's what prudence is talking about. Now, there are plenty of verses in Proverbs that while they don't directly mention child rearing, they can still be applied to bringing up children. And that's what we've seen. Verse number 1's like that. Verse number 3, that's like that. And all over the place you see them. But now look at verse number 6, back in Proverbs 22. Look at verse number 6. This is a very specific verse. Proverbs chapter number 6. Proverbs 22 verse 6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." Notice that. Training a child. You can think of that. When you think of training a child, the word that comes to my mind when I think about someone training, I think of like a coach. If you're training someone, you're coaching someone. Well, guess what? One of your jobs as a parent is to equip your children for life. And now you might say, hang on, I'm not a parent. Maybe you're not a parent at the minute. But one day, you might be a parent. One day you might be a parent. But these principles, they apply. Parent yourself. Because a lot of people grow up without good parenting. And so they could do with applying it to themselves. So like a parent, one of their jobs is to equip their children for life. What does that basically mean? At the most basic level, it means you need to teach your children. Okay, and if you want to apply this to yourself, teach yourself. Look, if you were to Deuteronomy chapter number 6. Deuteronomy, keep your finger in Proverbs, but Deuteronomy chapter number 6 and verse number 5. Deuteronomy chapter number 6 and verse number 5. It says, "And thou shalt love the Lord thy God." This is a command. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, with all thy soul, with all thy might. "And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart." Look at verse number 7. "And thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up." Notice what he's saying. He's saying, look, you have to be diligent in teaching your children. You've got to put time and effort into teaching your children. Now, some people think, well, hang on, and because this is specifically, teaching them God's word. Some people think, well, hang on, I just go along to church. I'll take them, they'll go to Sunday school. Some people have this idea. It's a Sunday school teacher's job to teach your children. But did you notice what it said there? It actually said, "Thou shalt teach them." Do you know what the word "thou" means? It means you. It means you. Okay? And when it starts with a T, like thou, thee, thine, that's talking about one person. It's not saying, it's a whole pile of people's job to teach your children. No, it's your job, you personally, to teach your children. Okay? You might wonder, why is it that we don't have Sunday school? Why is it we don't have Sunday school in this church? Okay? A lot of churches you go to, and there'll be a separate Sunday school, and the children are all taken off to that Sunday school. And apart from the fact is like, you should be looking after your kids and keeping them, keeping your eye on them. But the fact is that the Bible, throughout the Bible, and in fact I'll preach whole sermons, I'm not going to do it now, but the Bible, you don't see children being separated off. Jesus said, let the little children come unto me. And throughout the Bible, you can look in the Old Testament, New Testament, the whole congregation came together, both young and old. Everyone came to hear the word of God. Okay? And because, and there's lots of other bad things that, and understand, I'm not saying that a church that has a Sunday school is a bad thing. I'm not saying that. A lot they're just doing what they've been taught to do. Yeah. But look, if you, by nature, if you send your kids off to a Sunday school, who normally runs a Sunday school? Chances are it could be the pastor's wife, normally be her job. Some ladies generally run the Sunday school. Well, here's some problems. If that's going on at the same time as church, that means those people, they're not in church. They're not hearing the preaching. That's not a good thing. Not only that, the children, they're going away, and what happens when I go to church? Well, when I go to church, I go into this room with this lady, and this lady teaches me things. And she normally gives me food, and we play games. It's all fun and entertaining. That's what we do. So that's what church is. So they think church is entertaining, being taught by a woman. Well, guess what? Didn't the Bible say, train up a child in the way he should go? When he's old, he won't depart from it. Maybe when they grow up, they'll find a church where they go and get entertained and taught by a woman. Is that what would happen? Could well be. Maybe they'll go into the local Pentecostal church instead of going to an independent Baptist church, one that actually believes the Bible. Okay? So it's important we understand these things. Now look, God is not going to hold the Sunday school teacher responsible for teaching your children. God is going to hold you responsible. And it's the same thing. God's not going to hold a public school teacher responsible for teaching your children. It's your responsibility. Because the thing about it, Jesus is our example, isn't it? He's our example in everything we say and do. Well, Jesus, if you look at Acts chapter number 1, Acts, it says that Jesus talked about everything he began both to do and teach. Acts chapter 1, verse number 1, it says, the former treatise have I made, O Theophilus, of all that Jesus began both to do and teach. So Jesus did things and he taught things. Well, guess what? As a parent, you need to do things and you need to teach things. Both are necessary. Because what happens if you teach your children, but if you don't do it yourself? You're saying, do this, but you don't do it. What's that called? That's being a hypocrite, isn't it? If you do, but you don't say. That's like the Pharisees. That they do, they say, but they do not. But of course, you can also do the other thing. You could do what's right, but not teach it. Well, in that case, you're being negligent. You're not doing what God's told you to do. Some people, it's like they hope that people are going to pick it up by osmosis. Osmosis. That's a big word, osmosis. Osmosis, one of the definitions of it is unconscious assimilation of ideas. In other words, it's like it's like when you put something in water, it dissolves and just goes out. And that's the idea. If I do what's right, it'd be like this. Imagine if I went soul winning, which I do. If I go soul winning all the time, I go preach the gospel to people, but if I never preached about it, and I just hope that you guys would just, where you off to, Pastor? Oh, I'm just out door knocking. And you might maybe I'll come along. As opposed to teaching you. Look, the Bible says, go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. Actually telling you, this is a command from God, you need to do it. Now, you're still free to do it, or not to do it. That's up to you. But if I didn't teach it, if I only did it, I'd be negligent, because God says we're supposed to teach. Apart from anything else, he says preach the word. That's the whole word. Okay? But here's the thing, is that you've got to be specific and you've got to be clear. And you've got to keep repeating the instruction until they really get it. Because children don't get it straight away. You've got to repeat yourself. You've got to say it over and over again. Okay? Because training's not something you do just once. Who trains at some sport? You just do one thing. Just do one. And that's once and that's it. All you need. Or do you repeat it? You do it again and again and again. You do it repeatedly. But not only that, you also need to realise there is a force that is actively working against any training that you do. Look down at, you're there in Proverbs chapter number 22. Look at verse number 15. Proverbs chapter 22 and verse number 15. It says, foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction shall drive it far from him. Notice that. Foolishness is bound in the heart of a child. According to the Bible, children are naturally foolish. Well, that's true, isn't it? Do you have to be a rocket scientist to figure that out? Don't children do silly things? They jump off things that they shouldn't jump off. They run when it's really daft idea. No, they've only just learned to walk and then they're running. And they'll run on unstable surfaces. I mean, how often do children hurt themselves? Regularly, all the time. They've skinned knees and all that sort of stuff. Why? Because they're foolish. Because they're foolish. It says, look, foolishness is bound in the heart of a child. I mean, it's like they're naturally sinners. Children are naturally sinners. You don't have to teach your children to lie. You don't have to teach your children to steal. You don't have to teach them to be violent. You don't. I mean, think about the child that bites someone. In most cases, that child hasn't been bitten by anyone. They thought it up themselves. They tried it themselves. Okay? It comes naturally to them because guess what? It comes naturally to you as well. It does come naturally to you to lie, to steal, to be violent. But hopefully, you've learnt to control those tendencies. Hopefully you have. Well, guess what? You need to teach your children how to control themselves. And verse 15 gives us a great tool. Look at verse number 15. It says, look, foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction shall drive it far from him. Now, is the Bible teaching that we should physically punish our children? Yes, it is. The Bible is teaching we should physically punish our children. Look across the page. In case we missed it in chapter 22, look at chapter number 23. This is a chapter that we sing. Proverbs chapter 23, look at verse number 12. It says, look, apply thine heart unto instruction and thine ears to the words of knowledge. It's saying, look, this is something you need to apply your mind, your heart to, and listen to this. This is important. What does he say? Withhold not correction from the child. He says, withhold not correction from the child, for if thou beatest him with the rod, he shall not die. Thou shalt beat him with the rod, and shalt deliver his soul from hell. You see, some people, when they see the rod, when they see, look, the rod of correction, back in chapter 22, of who people say, oh, the rod, that's like the shepherd's rod. You know, and the shepherd had this rod. It was like a long sort of staff with a hook on the end, and you just use it for grabbing the sheep and just pull it, just directing them. The rod of correction. Well, you can think that if you want to, but in chapter number 23, you've got that rod, and it says, take that rod and do what? Beat your child. It says, if thou beatest him with the rod, he shall not die. Thou shalt beat him with the rod, and shalt deliver his soul from hell. Doesn't it sound like a command? It does. And look also at verse number 13. Verse number 13 says, look, withhold not. Withhold not. That implies that they need something. If you're withholding something from someone, it's like they want it or they need it, and you're keeping it back from them. Well, guess what? They do. As a loving parent, will you give your children what they need? Yeah. You know? Here's a question. When's the last time that your children behaved badly? When did your children behave badly? You say, well, what's behaving badly? Well, how about this? Refusing to obey you. Refusing to obey you, that's behaving badly. Ephesians chapter 6 verse 1 says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Children, obey your parents in the Lord. According to the Bible, children should obey your parents. If you tell your kids to do something and they don't do it, guess what? That's being disobedient. If you tell your child to do something and he says no, that's defiance. Okay? Well, here's the thing. When was the last time your children behaved badly? Okay? When was the last time that you spanked your children? When did it last happen? When's the last time that you spanked your children? Now, understand, if you realise that some of what I'm preaching about describes you, don't get upset, but just learn. Learn from the Word of God. You know, don't you turn there, but 2 Timothy 3:16 says, all Scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness. So God's Word corrects us. Okay, just like correcting a child, guess what? God's Word corrects us. It says why? That the man of God may be perfect, thoroughly furnished unto all good works. It teaches us so that we can do what's right. We can think what's right. We can say what's right. I mean, just getting back to Proverbs 23 again, Proverbs 23, verse number 13, which says withhold. Think about another idea of withholding. Imagine withholding food. Imagine withholding food. Would you say that's abusive? Imagine you've got a child and you withhold food. You refuse to give your child any food. Now, missing a meal is not abuse, okay? But if you consistently withhold food from your children, I mean, don't they need food to grow properly? What would happen if you didn't? If you withheld the food from them, they would be malnourished. Well, guess what? Children also need to be corrected. They need to be corrected. Sometimes physically. And so when it says withhold not, it says withhold. That's saying don't withhold. It says don't withhold the correction from the child. And what is the correction specifically? If thou beatest him with a rod. And in case we miss it, the next verse, verse 14, thou shalt beat. Thou shalt beat him with the rod and shalt deliver his soul from hell. That sounds like, think of the thou shalt. Doesn't it remind you of something? It reminds me of the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt, thou shalt, thou shalt not, thou shalt. Hey, guess what? It's a command. Now, some people have an objection. They say, well, I love my children too much to spank them. You heard people say that? I love my children too much to spank them. Okay, turn back to Proverbs chapter number 13. Proverbs chapter number 13 and verse number 24. Proverbs chapter number 13 and verse number 24. Proverbs chapter 13 verse 24 says, he that spareth his rod. Now remember, we saw what the rod was for before. It was for beating, wasn't it? And if you spare your rod, that's really saying if you withhold the rod. Same thing. He that spareth his rod hateth his son, but he that loveth him chasteneth him betimes. Okay, so according to the Bible, sparing your rod, not spanking your children, is equated with hating your child, not loving your child. But loving your child is equated with chastening them. Okay? In fact, not only that, chastening them early. It says, he that spareth his rod hateth his son, but he that loveth him chasteneth him betimes. And betimes means early. You can read in the Bible, look up the number of times it occurs. It talks about, so-and-so, they got up, early in the morning. They got up betimes. That's what it's talking about. Okay? And so what we need to realise is that the goal is training children to do right. That's what we're wanting to do. And God says, look, if you love your children, this is what you will do. Okay? And if you don't correct now when they're young, what that really means is that someone else is going to have to correct your children. If you don't do it, someone else is going to do it when they get older. Well, here's the thing. Will they love your child like you do? Let's say you're teaching your child to control their mouth, not to be rude, not to be abusive to people. Because are there children who are rude and abusive to their parents? Who yell at them? Who say, no, I'm not going to do that? Yes, there are. Well, guess what? If you don't spank them, the child is going to get bigger. And they're still going to be the same. You see, nothing magical happens. Nothing magical happens that turns a disobedient, badly behaved, rebellious, violent child into like this well-behaved, socialised adult. It doesn't happen. If they grow up without being socialised, when they get up, when they're an adult, they'll be antisocial when they're an adult. And the thing about it is, if you don't discipline them, because as a parent, you should have control. You should have control. In other words, you should have the best interests of your children at heart. Which means, when you spank them, where are you going to spank them? You're going to slap them in the face? You're going to poke their eyes? You're going to punch them in the mouth? Is that what you're going to do? Now, there are people who do that. What should happen to those people? They should be hung, drawn and quartered is what should happen to those people. Okay? But children come with a ready-made area called a backside. Yep. It's large and fleshy. It's got lots of nerves. And if you whack it, it hurts, but it doesn't do any damage. It's just sore. Right. That's all it is. Right. Okay? And so that's what you can use that to correct your child so they can learn and alter their behaviour. Because that's the purpose. You want your children to alter their behaviour. You want your children. The idea is that children would develop self-control. That's right. We want them to have self-control. At the start, children don't have any control. So what you have to bring punishment into their lives so that they will think, I don't want that punishment. And so they'll control themselves to avoid getting the punishment. That's what it is. And that's why the punishment needs to hurt. It needs to be something that's unpleasant to them. If you just give them a look and they don't even feel it, what's the point of that? Now, obviously, when children are very little, a little wee tap on the hand with a finger, it's just a stern look, can be punishment. Yeah. But hey, if the stern look doesn't do it, if the tap on the hand, back of the hand doesn't do it, guess what? It needs to escalate. It needs to move up. Okay? And so we need to correct children, and we need to do it when they're young. Because if we don't do it when they're young, someone else will do it when they're young, when they're older. You see, if you don't teach your children to control their mouth when they're little, they'll grow up and they'll be bigger, and guess what they'll do? They'll mouth off. And guess what? The bully in the playground, he's not going to give them a spank on the backside. What's he going to do? he's probably going to punch their teeth out. He might knock them over and kick their head in. Could well be the case, couldn't it? You know? And so, if you love your children, you'll, because other people, they won't love them the way you do. They won't have their best interests in heart. I mean, remember, we talked about the little kitten and the big cat. Which is easier to do? Is it easier to train a little kitten when it's little to not do this and to do what's right? Or maybe wait until it's fully grown like a big tiger and then we'll teach it? Would that be easy or would that be hard? That'd be real hard. It's going to take a whole pile more force. Okay? And so, in fact, this is an interesting principle that it's really good to bear in mind when it comes to, if you've got a piece of paper, you might want to write this down or you just draw a little picture. The concept of a funnel. The concept of a funnel. And the idea of a funnel, when we think of a funnel, I mean, you might use it, if you're putting petrol or something in, you might have a funnel and you put it in so it's wide at the top and you pour the stuff in, it goes down to get into where you want it to get to. But this is like a reverse funnel. So instead of looking like that, it looks like this. Okay? And so, what it is that basically when children are little, they should have a lot of restrictions upon them. And they should have very little freedom. And they also have very little responsibility. Okay? Now, that's what should happen. But as they grow, they become more responsible, they get more freedom, and the restrictions are released as they get older. Okay? That's what's supposed to happen. But many people do the reverse. Because when kids are little, and they scream and fight and carry on, they can't really do any damage, and so people don't really worry about it. Oh, it's funny. They just laugh about it. And they let their kids get away with all sorts of stuff. So it's like a really wide funnel at the bottom. But then as they get older, they start to do more damage. They start to be more of a problem. And so then they try and constrict the funnel as they get older. And then they try and constrict it. It's the reverse of what it really should be. When they're the youngest is when children should be disciplined the most. That's what the Bible says. It says if they are... what chapter? Just lost my place there. Oh yeah, chasten them betimes. Chasten them early. Discipline your children early. Spank them early. Do it when they're young, so then as they get older, you don't need to do it. Okay? Because, you even need to use less force when they're young, because it doesn't take as much to hurt a child. And that's the point. You're supposed to make it so it's uncomfortable, so they don't want to do it. Okay? And the thing is, you need to do it early, because if you do it early, there's actually a chance, there's hope of success. Look at Proverbs chapter number 19. Proverbs chapter 19 and verse number 18. Proverbs chapter number 19 and verse number 18. It says, chasten thy son while there is hope, and let not thy soul spare for his crying. Do it while there's hope. That implies there could be a time when there might not be any more hope. There can come a time when it's too late. When it's too late. That's what the Bible said. Train up a child in the way he should go. When he's old, he will not depart from it. But it can be too late. Should have done it earlier. Okay? And notice this is, let not thy soul spare for his crying. Guess what? They'll cry. It's okay. It's okay if they cry. It says, let not thy soul spare for his crying. It's okay if they cry. Why? Because it's supposed to be, it's supposed to hurt. That's the purpose of it. Now, just another couple of quick principles we'll get through here. Don't discipline in anger. Don't discipline in anger. Look back at Proverbs 22 where we started. Proverbs chapter 22, verse number 8. Proverbs 22, verse number 8. It says, look, he that soweth iniquity shall reap vanity, and the rod of his anger shall fail. Notice that. The rod of anger is going to fail. If you get mad when you spank your children, that's not going to be successful. It's not going to be successful. You shouldn't be because when your children are little, you'll need to be disciplining them a lot. That's just a fact. And if you're getting angry and doing it, apart from the fact that you will lose self-control when you're angry, people don't have as good self-control, but that means you'll be angry all the time because you're disciplining them all the time. We'll look down at verse number 24. It says, make no friendship with an angry man, and with a furious man thou shalt not go, lest thou learn his ways and get a snare to thy soul. We shouldn't be an angry person. We shouldn't be a furious person. Don't discipline in anger. Remember, the purpose of it is to correct the child. It's for the child's benefit. Look at Proverbs chapter number 29. So don't discipline in anger, but also remember, spend time with your children. This is really important. Spend time with your children. Proverbs chapter 29 and verse number 15. It says, the rod and reproof give wisdom. Doesn't that fit in with what we saw before? Folly is bound in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction shall drive it far from him. What's it doing? Getting rid of folly, giving wisdom. The rod and reproof give wisdom, but a child left to himself bringeth his mother to shame. Leaving children by themselves. You should be with your children. Back we saw that in Deuteronomy. These words shall be in your heart, and you should teach them diligently to your children. When they sit us in the house, when they walk us by the way, when they lie us down, when they rise us up. Your kids were with you, and you're teaching them. But notice also, it does say the rod and reproof. It says the rod and reproof. It's not just spanking. Spanking is not the remedy for everything your children do. I've heard people say that. Yeah, spanking, that's all you do. Spanking is the only thing. Well, it says, look, rod and reproof. What's reproof? It's telling them off. Just telling them off. There are other things that you do. But don't neglect, don't remove the rod. If you remove the rod, you're not following what the Bible says. Now, tonight, I'm actually going to be preaching on just on a different topic, on some of the brainwashing that's been going on in our society. But the area of child discipline is one of those areas. It's an area where there's been a lot of brainwashing. Many parents today, they're frightened to discipline their children because they think that it is abuse and that they'll permanently damage their children if they do that. But the truth is, your children will be damaged if you don't correct them. If you don't correct them, they will be permanently damaged. Look at Proverbs chapter number 3. Proverbs chapter number 3 and verse number 11. Another chapter we sing, Proverbs chapter number 3 and verse number 11. It says, my son, despise not the chastening of the Lord, neither be weary of his correction. God chastens. Do you know that? God spanks. He chastens. Verse number 12. For whom the Lord loveth, he correcteth, even as a father the son in whom he delighteth. Why? Because he loves. That's why God corrects. And if you love your children, you will correct them. Verse number 13 is not unrelated to what we've just read. It says, look, don't despise the chastening of the Lord, whom he loves he correcteth. And then it says, happy is the man that findeth wisdom. Well, remember how correcting your child, folly, you drive it out. That's going to make them wise. Well, guess what? Happy is the man that findeth wisdom, and the man that getteth understanding. Wisdom is the opposite of folly, and it leads to happiness. Do you think it's a coincidence that as youth suicide has increased, at the same time biblical correction has decreased? People spank their children less, goes down, youth suicide goes up. And yet the Bible says the person who gets wisdom, they're happy. Guess what? If you don't get wisdom, if you're a fool, you're not happy. Okay? It says here, for the merchandise of it is better than the merchandise of silver, and the gain thereof than fine gold. She is more precious than rubies, and all the things thou canst desire are not to be compared unto her. Length of days is in her right hand, and in her left hand riches and honour. Notice again, you get wisdom, you get all these things. You live a long time. You have riches, you have honour. These are good things when you have wisdom as opposed to folly. So you want to just leave the folly in your children. Just leave them. Because what's going to happen? What's going to happen to them is they will actually grow up and they will still be foolish. I used to go down to the prison a lot before they decided I wasn't allowed to go there anymore because I kept telling people what the Bible actually said. And anyway, here's the thing. The people that you meet down in prison, a lot of people, not everyone, there are people in prison that shouldn't be in prison. Mm-hmm. There are people in prison who are there wrongfully. Okay, they're definitely. But here's the thing: a lot of the people over there, they do deserve to be there, or they deserve worse. A lot of them they should be put to death. But that's another story. We'll talk about that tonight. But often, what they really are, they're people who never grew up. They're people who they have no self-control. They have no. The people down there, do they control their tongues? They don't. Do they control what they do? No, they don't. They have no self-control. What they really are, think of that violent, angry, aggressive little child. Do you know what they are? This is just the big version. Yeah. This is just the big version. Okay? Now, sometimes people, they'll try and, they'll put this on you and say, but those people in prison, you see, they were beaten as a child. They were beaten as a child. And often that's true. Often that's true. But these were people who, they weren't disciplined biblically. They were physically assaulted. They had their teeth knocked out. They were assaulted by abusive, drunken fathers, if they were even there. They had all that sort of stuff. That's not the same thing. And that's why, if you go and try and look there's a whole pile of scientific studies which say that spanking doesn't work. Do you know that? Yeah. Because what they do is they put, correct biblical discipline in the same boat as people that are abused by some drunken, violent, psychopathic father. And they put them in the same boat. And guess what? People who get abused by drunken, violent, psychopathic fathers, more often than not always, but more often than not, they'll end up being the same. And so they'll end up being in prison. Okay? But the fact is that if a parent lovingly disciplines their child, that's how self-control, that's how it develops. It develops by there's a consequence, there's a punishment for this, and so they learn not to do it. Okay? Now, that means that the punishment needs to be consistent. If the child does it, maybe they'll get a spanking, maybe they won't. Maybe they'll get away with it, then it's like there's no consistency. It's random. They're not going to develop any self-control that way. Okay? I read a book recently that was, this was a guy, he's not a Bible-believing Christian, but he made some good points. And he said, it really stuck with me, he said, don't let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. Think about your children. Are they doing something that's making you not like them? You shouldn't let them do it. Don't let them do it. He said, don't let your children become despised by other people. Don't let your children behave in such a way that other people don't like them. I mean, have you ever been through a supermarket? You've ever seen a badly behaved kid? Throwing a tantrum, throwing a fit, doing things, and people sort of look, it's like, I don't want to look. Do that, because what? No one likes that. No one wants to see a child behave in a way like that. Now, understand, just for clarity, is it true that as a believer, people will despise you? Yeah. Jesus said, they hated me, they're going to hate you. But there's a balance we need here. It says in 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 14, it says, if there be reproach for the name of Christ, happy are ye. In other words, if people despise you or hate you or cast out your name as evil because of the name of Christ, happy are ye. For the Spirit of glory and of God resteth upon you. On their part is evil spoken of, but on your part is glorified. But then it says, but let none of you suffer as a murderer, or as a thief, or as an evildoer, or as a busybody in other men's matters. Saying, look, if you're reproached, if you're hated, if you're despised because you're following Christ, hey, that's one thing. But don't be hated or despised or reproached because you're a bad egg, you're a thief, you're an evildoer. Do you see what I'm saying? And the fact is that some people, who wants to be around someone that's behaving obnoxious? Who wants to be around someone that's behaving like, no one does? Well, guess what? Don't let your children be like that. And so what that means is you have to be willing to say no to your children. Your children want to do something, and you need to say no. You need to say, stop doing that. And that means you need to mean it, and you need to enforce it. Because if you just say no and you don't enforce it, what does that mean? Did you know what you're actually doing then? You're actually teaching your children that when my mum or my dad says something, they don't mean it. So you're teaching them to ignore what you say. That's what you're doing. You're teaching. But not only that, it could be worse. You could be teaching them, because, children are looking for boundaries. They're looking for boundaries. And if you don't give them those boundaries, they're going to go further and further and further, looking for some boundaries. That's why you need to bring it back in. And say no and mean it. And there needs to be a consequence. Okay? It's just so important. Because otherwise it's meaningless. If you say no and nothing, don't do that, and they do it, and nothing happens. They're just going to treat you like dirt. But guess what? If your child treats you like dirt, if they ignore you, you say don't do that and they do it anyway. If they ignore you and treat you like dirt, they're going to grow up and they're going to treat other people like dirt, because that's what you taught them to do. You taught them to do that. Okay? And so we need to understand that it's important that we bring correction. And as I say, it's not just a spank all the time. Even think about the magnitude. The magnitude of spanking varies with the offence. It varies with the child. It varies with the age. You can't just equate it all together. You can't say, punching a child's teeth out is the same thing as smacking on the bottom. It's not the same. It's not the same. A raindrop falling from the sky and landing on your head is not the same thing as some massive, huge, heavy thing landing on you. They're different. Magnitude makes a difference. Okay? Now you might say, well, hang on. All these references you've given us so far this morning, pretty much most of them have come from the Old Testament. Okay? Why did you do that? Well, first it was just to make it easy for you. It's really handy. The book of Proverbs has got so much you can just turn backwards and forwards. But since you're asked, have a look at Hebrews chapter number 12. Hebrews chapter number 12. Hebrews chapter number 12. Because this is just not an Old Testament concept. This is a New Testament concept as well. Hebrews chapter number 12. Hebrews chapter 12, look at verse number 5. It says, "And ye have forgotten the exhortation which speaketh unto you as unto children, my son, despise not thou the chastening of the Lord, nor faint when thou art rebuked of him." Notice that. It says, don't despise it. If you're getting corrected by God, this is referring to. It says, look, verse number 6. "For whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom he receiveth." It says, look, God, because he loves us, he chastens us. He scourges us. Look at verse number 7. "If ye endure chastening, God dealeth with you as with sons. For what son is he whom the Father chasteneth not? But if ye be without chastisement, whereof all are partakers, then are ye bastards and not sons." So according to the Bible, being spanked, being chastened, is a sign of being a son. God will chasten you if you're his child. Well, guess what? If you're a loving parent, you will chasten your children. Look at verse number 9. It says, "Furthermore, we have had fathers of our flesh which corrected us." So we all had fathers which corrected us. We should have. "And we gave them reverence." That means reverence or respect. "Shall we not much rather be in subjection unto the Father of spirits and live?" Here's this. Do your children respect you? Do they reverence you? If you tell them to do this, do they do it? Because if they don't do it, what does that mean? They don't reverence you. They don't respect you. And they should. Look at this, verse number 10. "For they verily," talking about your earthly fathers, "for a few days chastened us after their own pleasure." It's only a short. You only discipline your children. You know, obviously when they're only still at home. But I mean, it should be most in those early years. Later on, they shouldn't need any. Okay? I shouldn't be bending my sons over my lap to whack their backsides. Why? Because they've grown. They've learnt to do what's right. But here's the thing. It says for a short time, but it says also chasten us, for a few days chasten us after their pleasure. You see, because if you discipline your children, if you bring them up the way God says to, you'll love your children. You'll actually like being around them. They'll be nice. They'll be pleasant people to be around. Here's the question. Do you and do other people like being around your children? Do they? I like being around my children. Now, you know, my children aren't perfect. But guess what? Other people like being around my children. I've lost count of the number of times where in social settings, over at the squash club, in different places, and people have said, "You've got great children." And it's like, you know, and people just sort of think, I just got lucky. I just drew, you know, I pulled got the lucky number out. Well, I got the lucky number with this one and with this one. But it's not. It's not. You see, children need to be socialised. They need to be socialised. And that's one of the jobs of a parent. Teaching your children how to behave. That's what it means to be socialised. Like we homeschool our children. And people are, what about the socialisation? Give me a break. Sending children to school is antisocial. It's antisocial. Because when you send your... And understand, I'm not against you if you've sent your children to school. Or if I went to school. Okay? But the thing about it is, what did the Bible say? Folly is bound in the heart of a child. Okay? Children are foolish. The Bible also says, "He that walketh with wise men shall be wise, but a companion of fools shall be destroyed." Guess what? If you send your children to hang around with other children, a pack of children together, they're foolish. That's not going to socialise them. That's going to teach them to do right. It's going to teach them to do wrong. And it's not preparing them for the real world. Nowhere in the real world are people in age-segregated classes and stuff. That's just nonsense. It's stuff that's been, I don't know who invented it and stuff, but it's been used over the years by, dictators use it to indoctrinate people. You know, Hitler was big on schools. Hitler Youth. That's what he was about. He was anti-homeschooling. I think homeschooling's still illegal in Germany to this day. It's still illegal. People tried to homeschool their kids, and the authorities come and took them. They were trying to leave the country to go somewhere where they could homeschool, and they came and took their kids off them. It's the legacy of Hitler. That's what that is. But it still exists in other countries. People around today want to take your kids off you. Okay? But sorry, I got off track. That was a bit distracting. You should be You should like being around your children. Other people should like being around your children. Because guess what? And if people do like being around your children, they're going to have a good life. They're going to be successful in life. Aren't they? You know, the people that are locked up in the Milton Hilton, people don't like being around them because they're obnoxious. They're rude. They're violent. They lack self-control. With obviously the disclaimers, the people in there that shouldn't be in there. Okay. And then the last verse number 11 says, "Now no chastening for the present seems to be joyous." It's not pleasant to get a spanking. It's not. But grievous. That's why they cry. "Nevertheless, afterward it yieldeth the peaceable fruit of righteousness unto them which are exercised thereby." When you get spanked, guess what? It yields righteousness. It teaches your children to do what's right. Okay? And I mean, how often have you spanked your children, and then afterwards it's like they're a new person. It's like they needed that. They're so much better when they've had a spanking. Now, if they're still wild and rebellious, maybe you haven't spanked them hard enough. Okay? Let's finish up back in... turn back to Proverbs chapter number 22. But notice it said there, it said, "Look, the fruit of righteousness unto them which are exercised thereby." Exercise, that sounds like training. Proverbs chapter number 22. Proverbs chapter number 22. The title of the sermon this morning is Biblical Child Rearing. Biblical Child Rearing. Now, there's a lot more that could be said, but it's like with any area of life, when we look at what we're doing and what we could be doing, there's a lot of room for improvement. My parenting is not perfect. My wife's parenting is not perfect. Our children aren't perfect. Your parenting won't be perfect. But don't be discouraged or overwhelmed by it. Just ask yourself, look, what's one area I could improve? And then make that change. Maybe you don't spank your children. That's the first change I would make. If you don't spank your children, you need to introduce that. You need to spank them. Okay? Make a change, make another change. Sometimes you slip back. You slip into an old habit. Recognise it and then correct it. Okay? I mean, if you don't punish your child, someone else will. Might be a policeman. You know? Could be their employer. How would their employer punish them? They'd sack them.
Fire them.
They'd fire them. Maybe it's the prison guard. Okay? It's important we understand. God says, "Foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction shall drive it far from him." And understand, I didn't always know the stuff that I know now about parenting. Okay? I remember when Daniel first came along, we had no idea what to do with the baby. Fortunately for us, my wife talked to the Christian friend of hers on the phone and said, "Look, what do we do? What do we do with this baby? He just makes noise all the time and it doesn't sleep. And what do you do?" And she said, "Oh, I've got this book. I'll send you this book." It was great. It was a really good book. It was about biblical ways of raising your children. Hey, you need to make the decisions for them. That you're in charge. You make the decisions. You teach them what's right and what's wrong. And then later on, they get more freedom. They get more responsibility. They get, more independent. Because ultimately, your children, eventually, they're going to be completely independent. Whether you like it or not, that's what's going to happen. But rather than being tightly constricted, and then suddenly, it should be the opposite. They should be tightly constricted at the start, and then as they earn freedom by responsible self-controlled behaviour, they get more, and they get more, and they get more until finally you don't even notice. It's just a gradual transition. See, things that they didn't used to be allowed to do, they're allowed to do. Why? Because they've proved themselves, they've showed themselves responsible. And it's not that they'll be perfect. You're not perfect, and they're not going to be perfect. Look down at... look just at the end of the chapter. Look at verse number 28 of chapter 22. Look at verse number 28. So, listen, what's this got to do with anything? Verse 28 says, "Remove not the ancient landmark which thy fathers have set." Remove not the ancient landmark which thy fathers have set. We need to realise, previous generations, they knew something. You see this concept of not spanking children. This is something that's new. In New Zealand, it's illegal to spank your children. It's against the law to spank your children in New Zealand. That's something that's new. It's only been, when they bring it in.
It's illegal?
It's illegal. Yeah, it's against the law.
Spank your children?
It is illegal to spank the children. Yeah, it's against the law. Now, do I care? Well, I wish it wasn't the case, but tough. The Bible says it's better to obey God than to obey man. That's what we should do. Okay? And the thing about it is that, I mean, it's only been, it was 2000 and something, I think, when they brought it in. So it's maybe 15 years or whatever. I'm not sure the exact whenever it was. And it's silly to bring this law in to make. So that means that most parents in New Zealand have broken the law. Because most parents in New Zealand have spanked their children. Most people still think it's the right thing to do. Now, it's gone down. It's reduced because they're constantly, you're getting this message, don't do this, it's bad for you. Okay? And yet, is our society becoming better? Are we becoming, less violent and more law-abiding? And, is it a safer place to raise your children? It's actually not. I mean, New Zealand used to be a very safe place. I mean, obviously, stuff that's happened in the news just recently, but it used to be very safe. But it's changed over time. I mean, I knew a guy who came out here from the United Kingdom, and he said when he first came out here, and it would have been probably maybe the late 60s and stuff, he said that, women would go down the main street of Dunedin and do their shopping. They'd have a baby in a pram, and they'd go along the main street, and they'd park the pram outside a shop, baby in the pram, leave the baby in the pram, go into the shop, you wouldn't be able to do that now, go into the shop, buy something, come out, pop some of what they'd bought in the pram, move along further, park it further along, leave the baby and the shopping in the pram, go into the shop, then buy something else. That was normal. People didn't lock their cars, people didn't lock their houses, that's what it used to be like. But do you think you could do that now? I mean, someone would probably nick off with the baby, someone would nick off with the shopping, wouldn't they?
And the pram.
Yeah, and the pram, the whole lot. It's changed. And yet, back in those days, it was normal. See, I'm preaching this stuff to you because this is what the Bible says.
Yes.
And I've got no choice. God says, preach it.
Yeah.
But back then, back in the 60s, back in the 70s, people who didn't believe the Bible, non-believers, they all thought, everyone knew this is what you're supposed to do. Spank naughty children, teach them not to be naughty. That's normal. Just the same way as it used to be a man and a woman would get married. That used to be normal. Just like it used to be a man would go out and work and earn and support his family. That was normal. That a woman would stay home and be a keeper at home, which is what the Bible says. That was normal. I mean, that's what my parents were like. My mother, I came home from school, my mother was there. That was normal. Now, my parents went to church, they knew the Bible. Guess what? My wife's parents is the same, even though they weren't believers, because it was just a normal thing. It's the normal thing. And so when the people have done stuff in the past and they knew that was the right thing, we should learn that. Don't think, this is what's been done for thousands of years, this is how children were raised, we know better than them, we're going to change it. The Bible says, look, remove not the ancient landmark, which our fathers, and that's a landmark. Spanking your children, it's a landmark. It's something that's been done. And there's a reason for it. Look down at chapter number 23. Look, it says, withhold not correction from the child. Don't withhold it. If thou beatest him with the rod, he shall not die. Thou shalt beat him with the rod and shalt deliver his soul from hell. You're teaching him there's consequences for actions. If you don't spank your child, they'll think, there's no consequences for my actions. Heaven, hell, don't believe in that. It's important. It's important. Very last verse, look down, you're in chapter 23, look at verse 26. And this is very important. Very important. Verse 26 says, my son, give me thine heart, and let thine eyes observe my ways. It's very important. Remember we talked before about Jesus being to do and to teach? We need to correct our children, but we need to behave ourselves as well. Yeah. Biblical child rearing, that means we need to be the example for our children. We need to be an example for our children so that they can, it says, look, give me thine heart, let thine eyes observe my ways. It means look at me and follow me. That's what we should be able to do. And if we do that, we'll be teaching our children what's right. And they'll follow. But if you say do that and I'm doing something else, that's different. Okay, now understand, no one's perfect. I mean, I just had an experience just the other day where, I was learning from my children. I said to Daniel, he taught me a good example of how to behave with Rebecca. That was a good example, But guess what? I'm glad that I've brought Daniel up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And now I'm learning from my children. Because, they know the Bible. They've learned. And as I say, they're not perfect. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. None of us ever will be. But we should seek to follow God's ways. And when we do, we'll be blessed. The father of the righteous shall greatly rejoice, and he that begetteth a wise child shall have joy of him. That's what will happen. Let's pray. Gracious Lord, we thank you for your word, and Lord, help us to trust you. Help us not to fear man, and what's going to happen? What's going to happen if I spank my children? Lord, help us to know that your way is the right way. And it's not that we need to go out and be publicly, public's not the place to be spanking your children anyway. Lord, help us to train up our children in the way they should go. Help us to love them. Help us to care for them. Help us to nurture them. Help us to discipline them. Lord, thank you for the blessing of children. We thank you, we praise you, we love you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.